So, hi everyone, welcome back to the Academy of Advanced Thoughts. And today I have George Kavassilas, who has recently arrived in my life, this time around the sun. And so we immediately had a firm connection, a bro connection, but also we are connected by various different relationships in our lives. And so it's been absolutely wonderful to have had the opportunity to bring George onto this show, and hopefully I'll be on one of his in the future as well. But George, for those of you who don't know him, is an author, mentor, public speaker, and thought leader, and is someone who is absolutely fascinating in every way. And I think is one of the few people that I've met who sees things from a dimensional perspective that resonates with me quite strongly in a world which is suffering from significant illusion and arguably delusion. And so, so I'm glad that George is joining us today. George, I don't even know how to start this because there's so many directions we can go in. So I thought I'd better ask, what do you do, and how did you get here? Let's start from there.
Okay, that's a very good question. What I do is help people to address so that let me begin again. The broad brush descriptive is I'm a life coach, right?
Yeah,
But what does that mean? I mean, there's such a huge spectrum, right?
yeah,
So where I specialize in that field is I would call myself more accurately a remembrance coach, because I'm helping people to remember who we are, where we come from, what we're doing here, and where we're headed. And by understanding, I specialize in the big picture of life. So by understanding and understanding that real nice remembrance of that big picture, then folks can better find their place in this world.
right.
It's kind of like this huge missing piece of the puzzle for everybody. Yeah.
So
So
yeah, how
yeah.
do you do that? What's your methods of helping people like
So the way I go about it is, and how it came about.
that?
So I'm going to partially answer the previous question
Yeah,
as
let's do
well,
it.
as this one at the same time. Yeah. So was because I had a lifetime of truly extraordinary experiences. They were really outside of what we would call the status quo field, you know, which, we now know today is a containment field for human consciousness. It's not actually a space where we are, freely being our humane nature. There's all these other programs running people, which have infiltrated our consciousness, both individually and collectively. So I've had experiences throughout my life that were outside of that bubble, the space of the bubble, which most people, the overwhelming majority of people in my life, found it way too challenging to even entertain some of the concepts that I was sharing from first-hand direct experience. So I'm not a researcher. I don't read books. I've read about 10 books my entire life. Three of those were in high school because I had to read them. They just happened to be, which I'm really grateful for. They happened to be, two of them was Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and the other one was George Orwell's 1984. So I really appreciate my school for bringing in, the good books, for really expanding an awareness of an individual, and helping to see more of what's going on around the place. And then it went to, for me, with my family, with my friends, and trying to share with them my experiences. And that was very painful for me as a child and throughout my life, friends and family. It was very challenging. So I was always on that outer, I couldn't fully be me, John. And that's what I loved about when we had our first, really proper sit down and talk. We just jammed, and we jammed so beautifully, because you get it. It's just simple. You just get it, and you see it and you feel it and you experience it as well. Throughout your life, you've experienced it too. So for me, those experiences were very, very pronounced, very substantial in nature. And I was very limited to be able to express that. So it created this real huge frustration, hurt, pain, suffering, woundedness as a child, all that stuff.
Mm.
And it's taken me many years. I'm 55 cycles, orbits around the sun now, and it's taken me many years to get to that point where I can be really super comfortable with it. And
Mm.
I'm more comfortable in my skin now than I ever have been, because I understand, and comprehend that life is really broad, and my experiences are my experiences, even though they do relate to the broader spectrum of Earth, humanity, solar system, galactic realm, cosmic realm, universal realm. That's universal truths. We also have our relative truths, and then there's universal facts of reality,
Mm.
and there's this beautiful paradox, this dance between those two states that go on. So I really enjoy the fact that I've experienced the big stuff, and I now can live and have real lots of fun in the little stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, with the big and little paradox, or the duality between that. I think there's I've found the from experiencing other dimensions or other version, a wider scope of the universe. It's sometimes difficult to or challenging to translate that to people who are in a in a in a in a fairly closed holding pattern. And
Mm.
I've always kind of wondered and I love learning from different people, and I'd love to hear your take on this, of how do you, have you learned different translation mechanisms or dialogues or narratives to help people who haven't necessarily experienced other forms of reality? What's your techniques to widen people's perspective?
Yeah, and here's a beautiful example of that I tend to use for folks that haven't had these experiences and a bit of a challenge trying to grasp the concept of them. Um, Realities and like the structure of the universe are like different frequency spectrums. So if you just look at the old-fashioned tuner in your stereo system, or we used to have a dial and used to have the needle that went across all the different
Yeah,
frequencies. So
yeah,
you go to, say, back in the day, 104.7, when I was living in Adelaide, Triple M, I think it was back then. You hit a radio station, you're in a reality, right? In that frequency spectrum. Now you pull out of that and you shift frequency, and back then I think it was 105.5 Triple J. Now you go into a whole new reality just by shifting frequency, and then you can come out of that and go into another one, come out of that and go into another one. So you've got all these different realities that are existing parallel to each other, that are all operating different frequencies, and each one of those realities has their theme, has their modus operandi, parameters of functionality, and you go in there with your theme and you get to explore the theme, and then when the life cycle of that experience is done, the lifetime in that given reality, you come back out, and
yeah,
then you reevaluate, and then you choose, or by law, LRE, law of attraction, you then are going to work out where your soul path or journey is going to take you to next in the universe.
yeah. And do you think that there is a, I mean, let's take the statement, ignorance is bliss.
Hmm.
Do you feel, I've wondered about this statement for years, and I kind of oscillate between, I think my answer at the moment, um, because any answer about anything that I've ever had tends to be transient. Well, it's all transient. So I'll have an opinion at one stage, knowing full well that my opinion will oscillate and move and transport. So I don't attach myself to any of these particular opinions. So this particular opinion
Yeah.
on at the moment is that I think that ignorance is bliss if your path is to have chosen that for your fulfillment. Whereas I used to
I
think that
heartily agree.
yeah, do you feel that? I'm wondering what, yeah, what's
I
your
really
take?
do, I really do, because the alter ego of ignorance is bliss, is ignorance is slavery,
Right,
and
exactly.
we're experiencing that in the world profusely at the moment, and I
Yeah,
mean profusely. It
yeah,
is so evident, and it's a real issue as far
yeah. I
as
mean,
I'm concerned.
I've interviewed Matthias Desmet about mass formation psychosis on this channel,
Genius.
a few months ago. Amazing. And it was one of those conversations about 44 minutes into that conversation. We kind of both like stare at each other in silence, where we kind of reached the baseline of the rabbit hole of human slavery, which we're in. And it was kind of like, yeah, that's so and so and so and it's interesting
Where
that
to from here?
I mean, I've actually lost contacts with people. I mean, I've now deplatformed myself of Facebook and Instagram and so forth. I've realised the lack of purpose or lack of resonant purpose of those platforms to mine, but to myself. But interestingly, before I deplatformed myself, I lost a number of friends who were so fundamental. Well, not fundamentally, because that would be a bigger thing. They were so outwardly anti anything that would question the validity of direction from the WHO or from wherever, that they, that it was actually became abusive. And so I can only imagine that you've also felt either threatening behavior against you or abuse against you or stuff. Is that something that does that come part and parcel of being woken up to the way things really are?
It does. It comes with the territory, and because I'm not a person who's keeping quiet about it, then it does come with the territory. I'm happy to talk to people about it, to discuss, even if they want to debate some issues. I'm definitely not an expert in anything, but I certainly have walked a very different path in this life compared to most people on the planet, and I have seen things and I've experienced, and that is the real university. The path that we walk is our university, and all the other institutions are extracurricular activity. And really a lot of them are just not even necessary. They're just extra programs that someone else wants to impose on and us. But it really comes down to being able to look at the path that you've walked and being able to really cultivate the wisdom from the experiences that we've had. And once you begin to do that, you begin to realize that, hang on a minute, there's so much wealth, there's so much richness, there's so much goodness in everything that I have seen, everything that I've done, and everything that I have been in this lifetime and in others. Whether it's a previous life in this world, or it's a parallel life, or if we look at it from a linear perspective, a previous life in another world, in another dimension of time and space.
Do you, when you say experience things that very few other people have experienced, is there also would you say that there's an argument to suggest that all of us have had multidimensional experiences, but very few are aware of them? And I wonder that, because sometimes I think that due to what we're taught when we're younger and the conditioning of society, we are seen to look at dreams as not being real. We're told that this version of reality is not a dream, but what you dream about isn't reality. If you have things like instinct, for instance, you instinctively know something, and we're told that that's kind of just a coincidence. Whereas one could argue, from looking 1, 3, 5, 7, 10,000 years ago, instinct is where the real information comes from, because that's the truth. It's just all of the other heuristics and biases that we've now applied onto ourselves. It kind of dumbs down what we already know to be true. So is it the case that some of us experience many more things than others, or is it actually the case that we all have an option to experience all of the things, but very few of us are woken up to it?
Yeah, and it's yes to that, yes to everything. So it's kind of a yes and, really. It's not the binary either or process. Also, it's how we've structured our lives prior to incarnation. We choose a theme. We orchestrate agreements, soul level agreements with a whole array of other beings that we're going to be experiencing as in the timeline as it unfolds. Everyone's role playing for everyone, from the deepest truth of it, and we're together co-creating this reality and the way it unfolds in conjunction with the intelligence that is this planet and the intelligent being that is this solar system and the intelligent being that is this galactic space, etc., etc.
Yeah. Do you feel that the planets are separate to one another and galaxies are separate to one another, or would you say, from a quantum perspective, everything is all? Let's take superposition from the quantum realm. So everything is actually all in one place and is all in different places. But do you feel that there is a separation of things and places and time? So obviously now this is a time-space version versus a space-time version. How do you sit with that? Because one could argue it's another yes and they're both operating at the same time. But where do you naturally lie on that?
So yes and. So we've got the unified field with our friend Mr. Einstein discovered through the path of mathematics. And then realised he had to transcend it, and then he was, duly castigated for that, judged, persecuted, and ridiculed. So the unified field exists. I mean, we could look at this synthetic mouse, right? Not a biological one, obviously, and there is no separation between me and this piece of technology. This is existing in this reality, and it actually exists in the universe. So on a foundational level, this and me, we're made of exactly the same stuff the universe is made out of. So there's actually no disconnect. Yeah. We are in that unified field together. Then we have our own uniqueness. So out of that ocean of the unified field come the droplets, the waves, the droplets, the swirls, the galactic realms, etc., etc. To use an analogy of water. And so each galaxy, it's its own entity incarnating as a galactic system.
Yeah.
So each galaxy, when you come across a galactic realm or reality, you're actually coming across another living being incarnating as a galactic system. And then inside of that galactic system, you've got all the stars. So they go into that space and they incarnate as a star. The old saying of the indigenous folks, the original peoples from way back, as we call them today. They'd say, oh, that's your uncle, he's that star up there, etc., etc. There's actually a truth to that.
Yeah, well, there is.
And so this is not a strange cosmology. This is what has been known throughout time and is currently known throughout all dimensions of time and space, all civilizations. We just got to get, if I can just clear something up, Can we just get past the notion that we're the only ones that exist? That illusion, that delusion, that ideology. My passion's flowing with this because the evidence that we are not alone is all around us and it's inside us, right? It's everywhere. We're marinating in empirical evidence. It's everywhere. What it comes down to is a membrane in our field of consciousness that has been constructed in that containment field, which I talked about earlier, which we affectionately call the status quo.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. And I think let's start then with the, are we not alone? Are we alone? I think I'm trying to work out which of my favorite quotes it is. It's either from Professor Brian Cox, or it's from Einstein himself, or it's from, I'm trying to work out who I'm going to use for this one. Maybe Niels Bohr, who said that if quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you, then you haven't understood it yet. I think the quote around "Are we alone?" is that there is no statistical, there's not even a statistical chance of us being alone, due to the amount of galaxies equaling the grains of sand in the world. And so actually just mathematically there's no statistical chance. And now I'm just going to unpack the part earlier as well, actually, in tandem with that, which is that it would appear to me that maybe well, I've changed my my circle of friends because of this a bit over time. But it used to be the case when I would say things like you've just said when I was younger, people thought I was nuts. And in fact, I was taken to a
Mm.
specialist, and I was actually clinically diagnosed. I've been throughout the whole of my life seen as um, insane, I guess.
Oh, mate, I can so relate to that.
And that's why I'm kind of
Yeah.
raising this, because I think you and I have kind of uh,
Mm.
from my perspective, I went through the hold on a minute, maybe I'm actually there's something broken inside me.
Mm. Mm.
Firstly, actually, no, it started with a simplistic understanding of other. And so I would tell people about things when I was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever. And I didn't realize that when I walked around the corner, they were laughing. And
Mm.
then it became to my face. The bullying, I mean, from 5 till 16 was horrendous anyway, getting stabbed on the first and last day of school. And so that bullying, then it became, I started to realize I could pick and choose the people that was around. But even then,
Yeah.
it seemed rare to find that. And then I remember relatively recently, a lovely memory of mine. If so, one of the people who watches this, Sam Elliott, will be watching, and so Sam, I'm just going to tell the story. And so I was at this party with Sam and a bunch of other people about 3 years ago, and he sat me down. It's like 3 in the morning. Everyone's off their face, and he was like, "So, what's this quantum physics thing? What's this quantum realm stuff, right?" And I
Mm.
said, again, by now I'm 50 in February, right? So I've spent the majority of my life trying to find ways of explaining stuff that's almost inexplainable, which is why I admire your work
Mm.
so much. Anyway, I said to him, "Listen, there's this experiment, Sam, that you can look into." And this experiment I told him about was the penny drop, right? And so I told him this experiment, a real experiment that happened. And this experiment, there was this robot, and this robot was programmed with a random architecture, so it would move in random degrees around this kind of playpen, and there was no link, there was no order to the randomness. And there was a wall against the playpen, and then these baby chicks. And these baby chicks had just been hatched. And of course, when a baby chick is hatched, the first thing it sees that's bigger than itself is its mother in its head, right? Okay. So the baby chicks get hatched, and the wall goes upward. And the robot is just a robot. There's no eyes to the robot. There's no sensor. It's literally just like a little car with wheels that just moves around. And the wall comes up, and the chicks see the robot and assume that it's its mother. But then the wall comes back down, and then something really weird happens. The chicks start moving towards this wall, and they're emitting all of this desire to be with their mother. And the robot starts directing itself to the chicks. This is a completely randomized robot.
Wow.
And Sam was just like,
I haven't heard of that experiment.
yeah. And it was,
That is an absolute ripper.
I know.
Wow.
And no one in the whole, and they've repeated the experiment dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and all kinds of
Mm.
stuff observed by cynical people who are like, no, this is bullshit, blah blah blah. And it happens. And it is one of the most, and it's been silenced by so many media outlets, especially in the
Mm.
scientist
Mm.
community, because
Mm.
it would appear that this energy in motion, this emotion,
Mhm.
has a power that's greater than anything that can be explained with modern science, especially Newtonian physics.
Correct.
And
Correct.
and, and so that's now my way of explaining the esotericness of it all, which is actually not esoteric. It turns out that it's quite simple, and it's all about energy, and it's not bizarre new wave old crazy hippie stuff. It's ancient and factual and scientific. It's as scientific as you can get. So yeah,
It's
that's
life
where I get.
responding to the life responding to the structure of life, to the way of life and the way of love, the natural way of life and the natural way of life, because there are synthetic structures out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah, I don't know. Tell
Beautiful.
me what's your most convincing story that you use when you meet someone who goes, go on then, George, tell me what you believe.
Yeah.
Have you found a narrative that works? Because that one that I've just said, the robot and chicks, is
Mm.
my chosen way of explaining how what you think is real is part of an entire structure of
Something
energy.
a lot bigger than, yeah, exactly. For me, it's John. I've got to be honest. It's a case by case basis because the way I operate is I will connect my heart soul essence to another being. It's called empathy,
Mm,
and then we're in that co-created experience in that moment in time and space. And I want to make sure I'm not coming from an ideology, but I'm communicating being to being
mm,
in a loving and caring way. Sometimes I can do a bit of tough love, get a bit assertive, just to nudge through a program, mind control program, because we're all mind controlled to varying degrees.
mm.
So it's true. It's just honesty. And that's what we're doing. We're emerging through that. Emerging through that control. So how do I go about it? Case by case basis. For some people, I can share with them very little. It has to be something very gentle and subtle. With others, like your good self, we can go deep. We can just dive straight into the deep end,
Yeah,
like we did that night on your balcony. That was just epic.
excellent.
So
Brilliant night.
that was a good jam. So it was something that I found after a time because I was being belligerent and I was disrespecting people by wanting to impose my ideology. So with you, I know, and with your people here, the majority of your listeners, very open-minded people. So they're going to be able to at least consider some of the concepts I'm going to be sharing. And I mean no offense to anyone, but I'm very much a realist. So when I say we're all mind controlled to varying degrees, that's an absolute fact of reality. And the sooner we come to terms with that, the sooner we can actually transcend it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why the Academy of Advanced Thought exists
Mm,
is not only that out of the 60 or 70,000 thoughts we think per day, 90% are the same as the day before, but also
mm,
the thing that is controlling us as much as anyone else is ourselves. And through these heuristics and
mm.
biases that are essentially living in a repeat pattern of a story that we've told ourselves. And anything that
Yeah.
challenges the story we've told ourselves is seen as the enemy. And so we are our own worst enemy on that one. And if we can get out of the way of ourselves and concentrate on how we show up,
Yeah.
we could. I mean, that's one of the things I like about meditation the most, I think, and I found that is the solace inside that. And there's a whole section in the Academy of the Rise of Advanced Thought, my sixth book, around meditation and mindfulness, not in a way that is saying to everyone, you've all got to out and get a yoga mat and stuff. It's actually more practical in terms of slowing down these hyperventilating thoughts that are keeping us inside what Viktor Frankl would say are prison guards of our prison guards of our
Mm,
of ourself, but
mm,
those prison guards are equal to Plato's cave when the prisoners are shackled against the wall, facing the wall, and they see the shadows of the shadows of they
mm,
think prison guards. And one breaks free and realizes that the shadows of the prison guards were actually flickering flames, walks outside of the cave and sees this beautiful landscape of colors and
mm.
nature, and goes back and tries to convince the rest of the prisoners that they're actually not shackled and those aren't prison guards. These are just flickering flames, and they wouldn't listen. And it's
That's a
sometimes,
beautiful analogy.
yeah, and it's weird
Mm,
how we can show experiments, we can tell personal experiences, we can lead people into mindsets that we can even give people ayahuasca treatments or DMT service that can open the doors of perception. And even
mm.
then, not only are we surrounded by hierarchies and capitalist infrastructures that are telling us that these things are wrong or worse, unscientific, which is ironic, but also we ourselves tell ourselves that this isn't this other stuff. People come back from an ayahuasca treatment and go, yeah, but that was just hallucinations. It's
Well,
like, no.
the reason The reason we do that, John, is because we have. I'm just going to break it down. It's more complicated than what I'm sharing, but I'm just going to break it down just to four simple spaces
Mm.
within our consciousness, right? So, what we have is we have our conscious awareness, and in that conscious awareness, we have our natural consciousness, which is ours, our authenticity that comes through. We also have in that space our manufactured consciousness state, artificially manufactured by cultural programs that come in from external sources, right? Then we also have our natural subconscious realm, and we also have an artificially manufactured subconscious realm where we are connected to a collective. It's like a giant hive mind, you know? And I won't get into the technological side of it. It might freak a few people out, so I'll just hold back on that for now. Maybe you and I can talk about it privately. But that collective, mate, that collective space is really, really interesting, especially the subconscious one, because there's so much push from that space, which then taps into our own natural wounds in our subconscious realm. It interacts, it interfaces with it, right? Which then takes advantage. It's like our wounds are gateways, portals within our they're holes in our consciousness, or distortion fields in our consciousness. You know, little realms of distortion and hurt and pain and wounding, and and regret and anger and shame and guilt and all these beautiful things that we have as an opportunity for alchemy, right? And then this energy goes through into the conscious state. So what part of your thoughts, where are they coming from? They're coming from your natural subconscious space, or they're coming from the manufactured, which is the cultural editors that edit culture and then influence us into that status quo space, that cultural narrative. And then we have our natural conscious state and artificial conscious state. So if you break it down to like four elements, earth, air, fire, water, then we're operating in a similar construct, when it comes to our localized consciousness field, just our localized space.
Yeah, well described. Would you say that religion, traditional religion, and I'm actually going to be more specific about that. No, I'm not. I was going to say Western religion, but no, I'm going to say religion. Would you say that religion is a cultural control mechanism to some extent?
To some extent, I'll say it is the source of cultural control. All religions are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm treading slightly lighter on this because of the people that there's quite a few people who might listen in and so I'm going to be respectful to everyone's belief, as everyone knows.
I am.
Yeah, we all. Yeah, we both are. And yeah. But let's look at it from an objective view. One could argue that any form of ideology or dogmatism, or let's say dogma. So we could argue that dogma is religion in some extent. It's also capitalism. I'm wondering whether there is also a dogma in traditional education, i.e., we need you to learn the wives of King Henry VIII, but we don't want you to learn about mindfulness. And that's intentional. That's an intentional difference.
Absolutely. Well, the issue we have is there is a religious cult which is dominating the globe at the moment, and we call it science, but it's not. It's not real science. Science is proven itself, its disposition as a dogmatic religion, because science by its very nature, I'm a scientist, you're a scientist. Scientists by their very nature are curious people. We investigate. We're very adventurous. We get really excited when there's something new to go and explore and adventure and create and co-create with others. We get very excited about new paradigms that we become aware of. We become more fulfilled. Our awareness expands. We become better versions of ourselves from the wisdom gained from exploring these new frontiers. These are the real scientists, and there's lots of them on the planet, like beautiful scientists that are still operating from the natural world of science. Now we have this other thing, this institutionalized dogmatic organizations that are taking control of our planet. And this is a very real issue we have, because it's got nothing to do with science. It's all about dogma, and it's all about the control of the human population through policies, procedures, really hardline ideologies, and brutal as well. Like, you don't go along with them. It's like this religion of scientism. It's not science. It's the religion of scientism. It's a religious cult. They don't wear brown robes or black robes. They wear white robes, and they carry their books with their prophets, like Darwin and Newton. So, I'm having a go because I'm an Aussie, and this is how we communicate, right? We have a bit of banter, don't we? We call it banter. So, we have fun with it. We got such a big topic, but you got to have a bit of fun, and you got to be able to take the piss. See, I take the piss out of myself. You gotta.
Totally.
Right? So they get around in their white robes. They've got their Bibles, they got their books with their prophets, and really, if you look at it just from a structural point of view, you look at, what we see as traditional religious structures, and then you look at the way these it's the same. It's a cult.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a cult.
I find that there's even microaggressive signs of that, where, for instance, where you have to walk into this shop. There's a place in Broadbeach here that insists on you wearing a face mask, even though there's no more face masks, but you have to wear a face mask. And it's not about the face mask for the people, the shop that's chosen that you have to wear a face mask. What this actually is clinging on to a manifestation of control that means that there's othering, a guaranteed othering. I mean, when I first went to America when I was younger, one of the big football stadiums still had an entrance that said blacks and normal people. And this is within my lifetime, right? So when we went through Georgia in Atlanta, I couldn't get out of the car because it was too dangerous to be a suntanned person. And I still feel there is last week, a guy wouldn't get into the same lift as me because I wasn't wearing a mask. I remember when I was in a pub in Yorkshire in the UK when I was 19, and I walked in and the barman refused to serve me because I was the wrong color. And I'm oscillating between masks and racism because they're actually exactly the same thing. And they are, if you remove race and the technology of masks with a small t, despite the labels all over it saying these aren't medically effective at all. But if you remove all of that, what this actually is, these are totems. These are totems of control to say that you are not good enough. You are below where you need to be. And
correct.
And I've started my third TED talk. Starts with the TED Portugal talk I gave in 2013. Starts with the line: throughout history, populations and societies have been best controlled by limiting the amount of information they have access to. And when I said it, it was a hunch. I mean, I was 40 years old. This is another example of saying things and then realizing how extraordinarily unpopular those type of things were, not least the fact that the entire front row of this auditorium was the Portuguese government. But it seems to me that masks, vaccines, not serving someone because they're the wrong color, being suspicious of someone because they're from a particular culture, they're all actually the same thing. They're an othering for control, right? It's all a control mechanism.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, they really are, and it's also a sign of conformity. So, I naturally am a free spirit, and I have I'm a multidimensional being with a multidimensional awareness. I'm not saying I have that full multidimensional spectrum. It's partially active, far out compared to the way I used to be and the way I used to experience reality, and the way, it's vastly different. I understand the multidimensional nature of life, etc., etc. So, putting that aside for now, the mask issue is also a muzzle. It's like you are not allowed to speak.
Mm.
It's also, if you look at the generation of children that were born 2.5 years ago, now they lost all that ability for looking at their parents and other people when they're out and about, of that human facial expression and reading faces and reading emotion and body language, etc., etc. They are cut off from that. So there's been a great damage done to this generation of children coming through that have lost that ability to communicate with another human being in a way that they really need to. A lot of damage has been done. A lot of studies showing that. It's not, I'm not throwing some conspiracy theory out here. Just anyone who's a parent will get what I'm talking about. I'm a father of two beautiful young men, I get it, and it's so damaging. It's disgusting. It's horrendously bad. And the damage done to everyone's respiratory system as well,
Yeah.
et cetera, and all the studies. And I love this doctor who sat there with a vape, and he had a whole heap of masks. So he went through all of them, even the ones with the canisters. And he said, a so-called viral particle, was really an exosome, is way smaller than the particles that come out of this vape. So all he did was put the mask on and blew out after he sucked on the vape. And every time, every mask, everything just blew out through the mask, So the whole concept of wearing a mask for health reasons and safety is a lie.
Yeah.
I mean, it is definitely a social, psychological operation,
It is. I've on the plane on the way back from the UK last month, you had to wear a mask for the entire 24-hour flight. And I didn't. But I was chastised. Eventually, one of the stewardesses started to make fun of my surname as a retort for me rebelling against the mask. And she was like, you're old MacDonald, then you should go back to your farm. I wrote a letter of complaint to Emirates saying that I find this distasteful on numerous levels, but the resorting to ad hominem is something which I find most confusing, especially after traveling 500,000 air miles on Emirates planes over the last 30 years. Not that I will ever do again. That's my last air mile I ever will. And they replied back saying, well, you're welcome to take your business anywhere you like. But I was like,
over a mask.
Yeah. Okay.
Which has no health benefit, actually detrimental to your health to wear
exactly. It. And it was like, wow. So 500,000 air miles, 500,000. So each flight is like $6,000 times 10 a year times 20 years or 30 years. So it's better to lose $600,000 than to back down for an airline. Let's see
over a mask.
Yeah, let's see how that goes.
Just a mask. Yeah, just a mask. Yeah. Let's look at what they're not backing down for.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, just what fucking world? Like,
if that's not clear evidence for a psychosis, I don't know what is.
Right. I mean, and this is only
that's the mass formation psychosis.
It is.
Right?
It is.
The evidence is all around us.
I mean, seriously.
Wow.
Wow. And
John, if I could just jump in, when you see, I know it's kind of like it's like cognitive dissonance. Go what? When we see people, because where I live, it's on a coastal town. And then when you get the tourists coming in and you see them and they're standing on the beach by themselves, no one around, and they're wearing a mask. And you think, what? Are you allergic to fresh air, which is good for you? You'd rather sit there overdosing on carbon dioxide and filling your respiratory system full of bacteria that your body's trying to get out, which is no longer good for you. It's one of the wildest things ever. And you see the psychosis. People driving in a car by themselves with a mask on.
Windows up.
It's like the insanity is off the charts, right? It is a genuine psychosis. And nothing to do with science, nothing to do with rationale, nothing to do with logic or reasoning whatsoever. It is pure psychosis.
It is. And I'm amazed that we experienced it in our lifetime. So, I mean, I must admit, I'm on the different part of the spectrum when it comes to books. And read probably, if there is such a thing as too many. And I'm specifically interested in history. And the reason I'm interested in history is with a hope to not make the same mistakes again as a society. And I was convinced, even though, you know, obviously in 1984, George Orwell, and then Animal Farm afterwards, or Huxley's Brave New World, around that time of my life, when I started getting into that stuff, so the age of 10, 15 onwards, I was quietly confident that the Big Brother situation we were in was something that would maintain its containment to not spread into a ridiculous, palpable aberration of an abuse of human rights. And although saying that, there always is an abuse of human rights, the nanosecond that anything can be censored, the nanosecond that anyone can have no freedom of movement, the second that that you're not allowed into a place or out of a place or to say what you think, all of those things are abuses of human rights. Again, I'm using human rights from the United Nations definition of the human rights here, in case anyone was watching this going, hold on a minute, it's like, no, just look it up. And then this COVID situation happened, and I was like, shit, this is the nearest to mass formation. This is Nazi Germany mass formation level. And I'm not saying that in a hyperbolic way at all. It's actually, that's the nearest I could find. And I didn't think that it was going to arrive, because I thought,
look, if you understand who truly won the Second World War, the reality of it, not the story that's been fed in the public domain, but the reality of it, then you will understand what a Nazi Hydra is. You'll understand that America became the Fourth Reich, the deep state became the Fifth Reich, yeah? And we have a Sixth Reich, which is, now we're going other dimensions, and now we're going off world.
Yeah, and you know what?
The control, if hopefully I'm not going too far for your audience, but if you really understand the facts compared to a story, a narrative that's fed into the population, because the experiences that I've had are outside the status quo, so I do not have an awareness that's contained in that space. My awareness is outside, because I've got first-hand direct experience, and so do, by the way, millions of people. There are only some of us who are actually standing up and talking about it, compared to millions who are keeping quiet about it. Okay, so people would love to see me as a lone nutter, where they can point the finger at and vent all their wounds and fears and insecurities about their belief systems, because they get exposed. And this is what I've lived through since my childhood, right? So I understand how to, approach. I understand where people are coming from. I understand they need to defend their belief systems. They're invested in those narratives, right? And I was too. And my experiences showed me, John, they showed me that what I believed in was not real. What I was believing in was someone else's version of what life is and what reality is. So when I came across that experience, I had to deprogram myself. And that is hard. It hurts.
It does.
It literally, you feel pain. You feel pain mentally. You feel pain emotionally. You feel pain physically. Because we've also got it in our DNA through our ancestral lineage. Who knows what ritual your ancestor was participating in what temple or what cave or what organization, etc., etc. So our DNA has been marinating in the narrative for millennia, and when we come across an experience and our awareness wants to change, well, our DNA has to rewrite itself. It's in flux all the time, by the way. We're constantly changing the structure of our DNA. So when a scientist takes a piece of DNA out of a person and looks at it, they're looking at that sequence, which was that structure in that moment in time and space. This is where science leaves out. Because you could take a week later, a person can have quite a significant experience in their life, take another DNA sample from the same person, and you'll see a different structure.
Yeah. And for those, so two things you just mentioned that I'm just going to subtitle for those watching who go, hey. Firstly, in terms of the Second World War, not only is what you're saying completely right, but also historically correct. The start of the Second World War is equally as interesting. And I've written perhaps one of the only accounts of the actual start of the Second World War in my book, 28 Thoughts. And my book, 28 Thoughts, is a chapter called This Is Your Heart. And it's the only account that I can find without looking really deeply as to how the Second World War really started and why. And it's involving the control of the central banks and control of people to be kept in poverty and so forth. I mean, that's actually how it started. And anyone who wants to read This Is Your Heart, it's also on my blog on jonathanmacdonald.com. Read it, fact check it as much as you like. I have with four or five professors around the world. But anyway, you'll find that that's actually why it started, and equally that then leads into how it ended, and in fact it didn't really end, it just constructed a new
it's continued on,
and we're watching it with Russia and Ukraine at the moment. Interesting. Second subtitle to what you just said about the DNA. The reason why this is the case, which we would call epigenetics, and those who want to look into Joe Dispenza can look into the fact that, you know, our cellular biology doesn't know the difference between an experience that we have or an experience we think we have. And what it does is it rearranges ourselves through the proteins and the genes. We rearrange ourselves dependent on either a real happened experience, haptic experience, or a thought experience. And because our experiences are always questioning our internal story each day, what we do is we're trying to cling on to the way that our cellular infrastructure and genetic biology was, but it changes nonetheless. And we rebel against that, and that rebellion is a learning experience, but it also is painful. That's the physical pain that, for those who are watching, that George is talking about. So, George, another question that I have is, moving forward. I said this to Matthias Desmet at the end of our talk, and I asked him this question, and so I'll ask you the same one. What happens next? What happens next now? We are increasingly aware. Matthias says there's 30% of us who actually understand what the hell's going on. There's another 30% that are steadfastly hypnotized. And there's 40% in the middle who are swing votes. And he reckons that there's pretty much always a 30-40-30 split. And the role of the 30 that are woke is to help the swing voters come into the light, if you like. Without trying to sound too dogmatic. It's the opposite of dogmatism, actually. It's freedom and liberation. So what do you feel we need? What happens next from now? Are you optimistic for the future?
Long term, yes. Short term, it's going to get ugly. It's going to get pretty crazy.
That's exactly what he said. He said the same thing.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't seen
that's awesome, because
podcast
it's
except
awesome
for the first 10 minutes. I got 10 minutes into it, and that's as far as I got.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I've always said throughout the decades, people can look back over my work if they want. I've always thought that there's a 30% that will, again, I'm just sharing. I'm not saying this is an absolute fact of the reality. I'm just saying this is what it's looking like reading the play at the moment, okay? 30% are going to go through the whole process for Earth and humanity, what we're about. Like, you know, it's like, what is this species called human doing on this planet called Earth, we call Earth, you know? So we're in an evolutionary process, yeah? And so in that evolutionary process, about 30%, somewhere there, I say a third are going to go through with the whole process successfully. Well, you know, it's up to you to work out what that process is. I can share my version of it, but, you know, then there's a third of the population will experience the death process, and a third of the population will be harvested off-world. Okay, which sounds pretty wild to a lot of people. Like, you know, what is he talking about now? Saying aliens are real, blah, 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 blah. You know. So again, it's coming back to the notion that we are alone in this universe. First of all, we've got to really get past that story that we've been fed, that belief system that we've been indoctrinated into, because the people who are forcing that belief system on us are actually literally in contact with interdimensional beings and extraterrestrial beings. Okay. And I have lived and worked in that exopolitical world. Okay. So the notion that we are alone is ridiculous. And I don't mean to be insulting. It is absurd, right? It's like living on an island on this planet and thinking you're the only one that exists, right?
Mm.
And the fact that ships have gone by and people have actually come to the island, but you still turn around and you tell everyone, no, we're only alone and no one else exists. So you become a tyrant, basically, of control. So what we also have is the fact that Earth has never not been in contact with interdimensional life and extraterrestrial life. Yeah? And most of what we call extraterrestrials are actually interdimensional beings. You know, they come, well, we use the word extraterrestrial because it's away from Earth, you know?
Mm.
And we really need to understand that there's very small amount of beings that are genuine extraterrestrials as we would know them. Like you look out into the cosmos in this dimension of that we see, and how many come from out there as we see it. Okay,
Yeah.
because here's an example. Experiencing the solar system on another level, there are planets that we see in the solar system as we know it that don't exist in these other levels, but there are other planets in these other levels that exist that we don't see in our level. So our solar system has a different structure in other dimensions.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
and the one planet that is present through all dimensions of that being, that is the solar being, and in all its multidimensional expressions, is Earth. Our planet exists in every single one of them. Why? That is because we are a genuine fractal of the solar system, which is a genuine fractal of the galaxy, which is a genuine fractal of the cosmos. Okay. Now, this has been shared throughout time immemorial, all the mandalas of Buddhism and Hinduism and etc. etc. And you look at all the spiral patterns of the what we call indigenous. I don't know if that word's really appropriate. I still like to use the original peoples. And here in Australia, I don't call them Aboriginal because that means not original. I call them the Origines,
Yeah.
Australian Origines, right? And I've spent time with the elders, you know, in the Flinders on two very significant occasions. And it was just beautiful. They are incredible beings who their conscious relationship with reality is, wow. You know, and I've traveled the world and I've met lots of different folks. And the Australian Origines are something uniquely different. And the fact that they have 48 chromosomes and we all have 46,
Mm.
right? They are a uniquely different species of humanoid on the planet.
Mm.
In fact, in my documentary, and when I was sitting there with the elder, because I didn't learn this from them, I learned from my experiences as to who and what they are, from the path that I've walked. And I said to the elder, I said, you people are the root race of humanity. It's not out of Africa, no offense to everyone out there. It isn't. It's actually out of Australia and actually out of Gondwana land to be more accurate. Okay. So this, and I, you know, my heritage in this lifetime is Greek. I'm born in Australia. My parents were born in Egypt, but we have Greek heritage. Yeah. So it's not like a bias in a genetic sense. However, when I was there, they welcomed me home. They saw I was of spirit, you know. Same when I was in Hawaii, all the people there thought I was actually a local. It's this thing where when you have a multidimensional awareness and you travel the world, you can reconnect with those parts of you that had lives in these places, and then you merge with the land.
Mm.
That's the key. And then you have this harmonious vibration between you and what you embody and what energy you emanate, and then how does that harmonize with the land? And it's a beautiful experience to be able to walk in nature on the land and be one with it and have that dialogue in that unified field that Einstein discovered, that we all know through our spiritual journeys, etc., whether it's through shamanic medicines or with meditating or whatever, deep prayer, a real deep spiritual experience that people can have. or whether it's, something else like another being coming and visiting you and showing you things and taking you places, etc., etc.
For those who are watching and thinking that the statement about Australia being the motherland, for those geographic fans, like I am one,
Mm,
if you
mm,
spin backward through time, there's some beautiful visualizations online that will help you with this. You'll realize that Australia is no different from the landmass of Africa
mm,
and India. It actually then split afterwards. So when George is
mm.
saying Australia or the originees,
I've
he
said
is,
more accurately Gondwana land, yeah, which was
yes,
when it was all together. Yeah,
in
yeah.
altogether. That's right. So just for those who are kind of caught up on that, and I like to subtitle these things because it's one of the reasons why I love history so much. Because the more that for me, if I look into if I take almost any statement, however outrageous, I can, and you know this, George, because of our big conversation on the
Mm,
balcony that day, that I can backtrack that statement to an actual
mm,
factual situation that
mm,
backs up the statement. And so far, there
mm,
hasn't been a crazy. There isn't a statement that's so crazy that isn't backed up. Like even for instance, when you said the Earth pure fractal inside a fractal inside the fractal, as someone who's studied, I've read the Vedic Sanskrit texts. I've read almost
mm,
every translated Buddhist book that there is, and almost everything from the Indus Valley that's
mm.
accessible. And all of what you're saying has been spoken about through millennia, and I really do mean millennia here. This is like two to 10 to 15,000 year old understanding. In fact, a lot of it's actually written on my arm in something called a drinker, which is an ancient African script from 30,000 years ago. And so this shit is like, this is old school. It's weird how we're
Mm-hmm.
seen as new. It's like how this could be new thinking, where the truth
Mm-hmm.
of the matter is that it's always been there. It's just a question of who's
It's
awake.
always been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's whether you have the capacity to see it, to recognize it, acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
it's,
yeah.
it is what it is. So, George, tell us how we can find out about what you do. And I want to know what the book titles are, what your website is, how people can get in touch. Give us that bit.
Okay, I've got a podcast called Super Woo Radio, which we're organising a time frame for that as well, and yeah, yay, big yay, because we're going to go deep in that one. It's a platform where you can let loose, and just there's absolutely no limits at all. It's fantastic. And what else have I got? I've got a website called ourjourneyhome.earth. It's because of the fractal nature of this world that we've come to this planet, and we think of it as the most powerful crucible in the universe because of the fractal nature. So the way this galaxy and the solar system, planet, and the human construct, we are walking universes.
Yes.
If I can just, because it'll help people to understand where I'm coming from with what I share with my website, etc. So every cell in your body is a galaxy. Yeah. And every molecule is a nebula. Every atom is a star system. And we journey into those spaces, into what I call our innerverse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got the outerverse, you got the innerverse. And we go subquantum. It's just a beautiful journey into our own construct. It's gorgeous, really, when you begin to remember who and what we are. And we are, because of the fractal nature, everything's streaming in. Okay, so we are the sum total here, this incarnation. This is the forgotten story of humanity, the reality of humanity, right? We are the sum total of everything we have seen, everything we have done, and everything we have been in the universe. Every incarnation, every construct we are, whether we're space dust particles in, maybe I might be space dust in your galaxy. I as a soul want to have that experience. I also want to have an experience of maybe being a star in your galactic realm.
Mm.
Maybe you want to be a planet in V's star,
Yeah.
system in my galactic realm,
Yeah.
or vice versa. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So We are walking universes, and we are living in the human construct, the most powerful crucible for alchemy to bring everything back into a harmonious unity. You
Yeah.
know, within our own being, in this our entire universal existence. This is what humanity and Earth is about. We are the leading edge of evolution in the universe. It's not
Oh,
about big noting ourselves.
yeah.
It's about acknowledging the reality of the original intention for the creation of the human being, the human race, the human species to begin with. We are humane beings naturally, okay? That's our natural state. If you took all the control systems away, we would just automatically revert back to our humane beingness, where we live with love, honor, and respect and harmony and peace, right?
Yeah.
It's an automatic byproduct. Okay, so that's why our journey home Earth, because we have the opportunity to go back home by coming to this planet and living that integrative process. Also wrote a book called Our Universal Journey in 2003. That's the biggest experience of my life. We can go into it another time. It's a long story. I'll just say I reintegrated with my soul. This is the part of me that I call soul, where I'm whole. Okay?
Yeah.
It's beyond spirit, and it's beyond consciousness. Okay?
Yeah.
Consciousness is a wave pattern of universal mind energy. Spirit, right, is a formless energetic expression of ourselves that moves through time and space, and we travel with our consciousness together. They work together because we're in a universe of contrasting expressions. So they go together as alter egos of one another. The soul is what binds the wholeness of the two together. Okay? And people's idea of soul, most people's idea is something much lesser than that. But I understand the true nature of what soul truly is. And the more I share it with people, I come across many people who see it the same way that I do, and don't just see it, but feel it, know it, and experience it the same way that I do. So I'm not going to get trapped in just the pursuit of consciousness, because that's just mind enlightenment. So we've got to go beyond that. We've got to include spirit and soul as that whole equation. So and in that experience, where what I had in 2003, and just briefly, I got to experience life beyond this universe in the infinite nature of life. Okay. Where there is no creator. Life just is. It always has been. It always will be. There's no beginning and there's no end. Okay? So that begs a really big question, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'll just leave that for people to ponder.
Mm-hmm.
So our universal journey is about a book that I wrote 10 years ago. And I've changed a little bit since. I'm being completely transparent. I've changed a little bit, but I'm going to say 90% of what is written in that book, maybe even 95, stands true today. Okay, so that's pretty good, because we are on a J curve of accelerated evolution, right? And we are growing and changing dramatically. So yeah, I highly recommend, if people want to read something that's really uniquely different and a very expanded version. I do want to give a word of upfront, a heads up for people. It will expose everything. So if you are entrenched in your belief system, just be prepared to be challenged. That's probably the best way to put it. It's coming from a place of, if you look at, because what I experienced in 2003, I actually got to see the universe, and I got to see the structure. I got to see what's going on with Earth, and where Earth actually resides, where all the energies reside, etc., etc. So that was that huge experience, and I had to write about it. It took me years to reconcile it, and I wrote about it. And in that book, it will challenge. I'm writing it more from a Western perspective, even though there's other flavors in there, but it's just very pragmatic and very practical. So every religion has truth in it, of course it does. Every culture and spiritual narrative has truth in it, of course it does. However, the reality of life is beyond all of those paradigms. So if you invest yourself into one or the other of those, then you're going to be inside of someone else's narrative. Okay, so what you do is you objectively look at everything, pull the wisdom out of all religions. I was christened to Greek Orthodox. I went to a Catholic boys' high school, etc., etc. And that was the challenge, because I had a belief system going on, and then my life experiences show me, nah, that's not actually how it is. So I'm just sharing and giving people a heads up that this is what my ecosystem, if you come into my ecosystem, that's what it's about. It's about the big picture and helping us to remember who we are, where we come from, what we're doing here, and getting a bit of an idea of where we're headed.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's a huge signpost for people to, I hope, take seriously and act upon, because I think there's a lot we can learn from the work that you've done, and learn about ourselves and learn about the true state of the universe. I must admit, the point about unity that you mentioned, I've actually got tattooed across my rib cage in Sanskrit. So it's just to point my sweat, put my flags to that particular mast. So George, thank you so much for joining. I can't wait to be on your Super Radio, and on that one, however long you want to talk for, if these are little vignettes, these are an hour long, hour and a quarter in this case. If there's a longer moment on Superwoo, then what I'll do is I'll also share that back on this community as well. So we can go into
good stuff.
Far more details, man.
That'd be great. Like, there's no time limit. And look, just for the record, for folks who are thinking about coming and looking and exploring the website, entertaining that idea, I have a membership. It's going to cost you about a cup of coffee a week, which is great value, because you'll have access to hundreds of hours of webinars. There's great little tidbits in there. There's a section called Inner Intelligence, which, there's a great phase out technique in there. People can phase out of allergies, of EMF sensitivities, etc., etc. And it really works, because it just comes down to your conviction, your intention, your self-love and self-trust as to, really comprehending that you are the arbiter of your experience here in this world. You need to take stewardship. We need to take stewardship of our own existence in this reality. And as soon as we do that, then everything changes.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, George. And I've just bought your book as you've just been closing. So I'm the most recent purchaser as of right now. And I shall see you. I'll see you on your podcast soon, mate.
The email just came through. You're a legend.
There you go.
Thanks, bro.
See you, buddy.